The galaxy did not announce his arrival with prophecy or vision. There was no tremor in the Force that the Jedi, few as they were, could still interpret. No omen whispered through ancient holocrons. What came instead was noise. Static screaming across Imperial sensors in the Outer Rim. A sudden gravity spike where none should exist. And then, impossibly, a ship that did not belong. The Serenity tore out of hyperspace sideways. She emerged in a shriek of tortured metal and ionized light, her engines coughing fire as if they'd been punched by the universe itself. The stars outside the cockpit smeared into unfamiliar patterns, too many, too sharp, too wrong. Captain Malcolm Reynolds had half a second to register that the sky didn't look right before his console exploded in sparks. Wash! Mal shouted out of instinct, even though the man wasn't there. Old habits didn't die easy. Wars didn't either. The ship bucked hard, artificial gravity stuttering as warning klaxons wailed through the narrow corridors. Somewhere in the engine room, something vital screamed and then went blessedly silent. The Serenity lurched, not falling, but not flying either. Mal slammed a hand against the console, fighting the controls with muscle memory honed through years of bad landings and worse escapes. "Easy, girl," he muttered, jaw tight. "Ain't the first time the skies tried to kill us." Outside the viewport, a pale yellow star burned against a velvet black backdrop. Twin moons drifted lazily across the frame. No alliance beacons. No border markers. No familiar constellations. Just space, vast, indifferent, and very much not home. The ship stabilized with a final, bone-deep shudder. Silence followed. The kind that rang in the ears after artillery stopped falling. Mal exhaled slowly and took stock. Life support nominal. Engines bruised, but breathing. Navigation? Dead. Completely dead. The NAV computer's display was a spiderweb of corrupted data. Coordinates rewriting themselves faster than the system could crash. "Figures," Mal said quietly. "Jump one little border run, and the verse decides we're lost." He unstrapped and stood, boots heavy against the deck plates. The Serenity smelled wrong. Burnt ozone and overheated circuitry layered over the familiar scent of oil and recycled air. She'd taken a hit, but she was still his ship. That counted for something. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. Unidentified contacts. Mal froze. Slowly, he turned back toward the console. The sensor readout flickered, resolving into shapes, angular, aggressive silhouettes, closing fast. Not Alliance. Not anything he'd ever flown against. They were sleek, dagger-like things, black as vacuum, moving in tight formation. "Well," Mal drawled, hand drifting toward the pistol at his hip, "ain't that just welcoming?" On the far side of the system, an Imperial Customs frigate altered course. Lieutenant Varric of the Imperial Navy frowned at his display as alarms scrolled down his console. "Sir," he said, turning toward the command chair, "we're reading a hyperspace emergence without a registered signature." Captain Dreylees didn't look up immediately. He was a career officer, outer rim patrols, anti-smuggling duty, the kind of posting that rewarded vigilance and punished imagination. Every ship has a signature. "This one doesn't match any known Imperial, civilian, or alien registry," Varric replied. "Hull configuration is odd." That got Drellis's attention. He stood, boots clicking against the deck as he leaned over the display. The image sharpened. A narrow transport vessel, asymmetrical, scarred, and clearly not built by any major manufacturer. "No transponder," Varric added. "No response to hails." Drellis's mouth tightened. "Scramble ties. If it's a new smuggling variant, I want it impounded. If it's something else," he paused, "we'll find out." Back aboard the Serenity, Mal watched the incoming contacts resolve into something worse than unknowns. Fighters. Fast. Ugly. Loud, even through vacuum, like knives screaming through the dark. Green energy lanced out without warning, splashing against the Serenity's shields in a blinding flash. The ship rocked. "Right," Mal said, bracing himself. "So it's that kind of hello." He dove back into the pilot's chair, fingers dancing over controls that suddenly felt too small for the fight coming their way. The Serenity wasn't a warship. She never had been. She survived by being forgettable, by slipping through cracks between bigger guns. But Mal had fought empires before. Bigger ones than this, if you measure them by the weight they put on a man's soul. The fighters looped, coming around for another pass. Mal yanked the yoke, throwing the ship into a roll that sent loose tools clattering across the deck. Green bolts scorched empty space where he'd been a second earlier. "Come on," he muttered, coaxing power from engines that groaned in protest. "Dance with me." The Serenity dipped toward the system's outer debris field, a halo of shattered rock and ice that glimmered faintly in the starlight. Mal threaded her through spinning chunks of metal and stone, using momentum and nerve where he lacked firepower. Behind him, one of the fighters clipped a tumbling asteroid and vanished in a brief, silent bloom of light. Mal allowed himself a thin smile. "See? Told you she still had it." That was when the bigger shadow fell across his viewport. The Imperial frigate loomed into view, all hard lines and military purpose, its hull bristling with cannons that dwarfed anything Mal had ever faced. Tractor beam emitters began to glow. Mal stared at it, the weight of a truth settling into his bones. This wasn't a border skirmish. This wasn't a bad run or a crooked deal gone sideways. This was an empire. And somehow, against all reason, he'd flown straight into its territory. He set his jaw, eyes hardening as alarms rose again. "Well," he said softly to the empty ship, "guess we're misbehavin' in a whole new verse." The tractor beam locked on. The Serenity shuddered, and the galaxy far, far away took its first breath around Captain Malcolm Reynolds. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. Imperial detention bays were designed to feel temporary in the same way a coffin was. Clean lines, cold lighting, and a hum that never quite faded into the background, like the ship itself was reminding you who owned the air you breathed. Mal Reynolds stood in the center of Bay Auric 7, hands resting loosely at his sides, eyes taking in everything without appearing to. Stormtroopers ringed him in a half circle, blasters leveled, but fingers disciplined off the triggers. They smelled faintly of plastoid and sterilizing solvent. Professional. Not Alliance goons. Not criminals either. This was worse. Across from him, Captain Drelis regarded Mal with open skepticism. "You will identify yourself and your vessel," the Imperial officer said, voice clipped, practiced. "You are operating an unregistered craft within Imperial-controlled space." Mal tipped his head, studying the man's uniform, the rank plaques, the insignia, the rigid posture. He'd worn something similar once, long ago, before uniforms meant surrender. "Captain Malcolm Reynolds," he said evenly. "Ship's called Serenity. We got lost." Drelis arched a brow. "Lost?" "Yes, sir. Wrong turn at well." Mal gestured vaguely. "You ever been so lost you don't even recognize the stars?" A few troopers shifted. Drelis did not smile. "Your humor will not serve you here." "Wasn't aiming for service," Mal replied. "Just clarity." The captain circled him slowly, boots echoing against the deck. "Your vessel's construction does not match any known registry. Your technology is inferior to even outdated civilian models, yet your maneuvering suggests military training." Mal's mouth twitched. "I've had hobbies." Drelis stopped in front of him. "You are either a spy, a smuggler, or an example of technological primitivism attempting fraud. None of these bode well for you." Mal met his gaze without flinching. "Funny thing about boating, Captain. Always seems clearer in hindsight." A sharp crack cut through the bay as Drelis backhanded him. Mal staggered half a step, tasting blood. He didn't retaliate. Didn't even glare. He just straightened, eyes colder now, something old and dangerous stirring behind them. "Take him to processing," Drelis ordered. "Strip the ship. Catalog everything. I want a full report to the ISB within the hour." ISB. Mal filed the acronym away. Sounded like the kind of folks who asked questions with knives. They marched him through corridors that smelled of ozone and fear, past viewports showing endless stars that felt further away with every step. The Empire moved like a machine, smooth, efficient, uncaring. He'd fought machines before. They didn't care why you bled, only that you stopped moving. Processing turned out to be a small room with a table bolted to the floor and a pair of interrogation droids waiting in the corner, their photoreceptors glowing a soft, predatory red. Mal sat when ordered. The binders around his wrists hummed faintly, energy restraints. Stronger than anything he'd seen outside military stock back home. A different man entered this time. Black uniform. No rank insignia visible. Eyes like a man who collected secrets the way others collected scars. Captain Reynolds, the man said smoothly. I am Agent Callus, Imperial Security Bureau. Mal leaned back as far as the binders allowed. Well, that sounds official. Callus ignored the comment. You appeared without warning. Your ship defies known classification, and your combat behavior suggests a history of asymmetric warfare. Mal shrugged. I've been in fights. Yes, Callus agreed. So we've seen. Brown coat insignia recovered from your personal effects. Mal's breath caught before he could stop it. Ah, Callus continued, watching closely. So that word means something to you. Mal said nothing. The room felt smaller, suddenly, the hum of the lights pressing in. Browncoats. A lost cause. A rebellion that burned bright and died screaming. You fought against a centralized authority, Callus said. And lost. Mal's jaw tightened. Happens. Yet here you are again, Callus pressed. In another galaxy. Another empire. Do you see the pattern, Captain? Mal lifted his eyes. I see a man asking questions he already thinks he knows the answers to. Callus smiled thinly. The Empire offers order, stability, prosperity. Those who oppose it sow chaos and suffering. You, Captain Reynolds, have experience in that kind of failure. The words hit harder than the blow had. Mal remembered smoke-choked valleys, surrender papers signed with shaking hands, the weight of a gun in his palm when the war ended and everything he believed in went with it. I fought for people who didn't want to be told how to live, Mal said quietly. Still do. Callus studied him for a long moment. Then he tapped a control. The door slid open. Release him. Mal blinked. I'm sorry, you want to say that again? We are not in the business of executing every relic that drifts into our jurisdiction, Callus said. Your ship will be confiscated pending investigation. You, however, will be released on the nearest controlled world. Mal laughed, sharp and humorless. You take my home, dump me planetside, and call it mercy. I call it efficient, Callus replied. The galaxy has a way of grinding down men like you without our help. 2 troopers hauled Mal to his feet and marched him back through the corridors. Through a viewport, he caught a glimpse of the Serenity, tethered like a wounded animal. Imperial crews swarming her hull. Something inside him twisted. They put him on a shuttle and launched without ceremony. The planet below was a dust ball of rust-colored deserts and crowded spaceports, its skyline dominated by spires of durasteel and neon. Smugglers, traders, refugees, he could see it even from orbit. The kind of place empires bled quietly. The shuttle touched down. The ramp dropped. Mal stepped out into heat, noise, and the smell of unfamiliar spices mixed with engine exhaust. The ramp rose behind him and the shuttle lifted away, leaving him alone in a galaxy that didn't care who he'd been. He adjusted his coat, eyes scanning the crowds. No alliance. No serenity. No war to fight. Just a choice. Mal Reynolds squared his shoulders and walked into the sprawl. No flags, he murmured to himself. No trust. Somewhere above, Imperial sensors logged his release as a closed case. Somewhere else entirely, a handful of rebel operatives would soon start asking questions about a man who flew like a veteran, fought like a survivor, and looked at the Empire like he'd seen it fall before. The spaceport city of Raxus Minor never slept. It merely shifted its predators. By local midnight, the neon signs burned hotter, casting lurid colors across rain-slicked durasteel streets. Vendors shuttered legitimate stalls and opened illegal ones. Bounty hunters emerged from shadowed cantinas, armor scuffed, eyes sharp. Mal Reynolds moved through it all like a man who understood the rules without needing them explained. He traded his last Imperial-issued ration shit for a blaster that felt wrong in his hand. Lighter than he liked, the grip molded for species with longer fingers. Still, it fired straight enough. He tested it once at a private range run by a Rodian who asked no questions and charged extra for silence. Credits were the problem. He had none worth speaking of. Imperial script was useless outside sanction channels, and whatever local currency Raxus ran on changed value by the hour. Mal adapted the way he always had, by listening. Cantinas told you everything if you let them. The hum of overlapping languages, the hiss of pressurized taps, the smell of cheap alcohol and desperation. It all blended into a rhythm Mal knew well. He leaned against a support pillar, nursing a drink that burned like solvent, and watched. Two Nikto argued over a crate that definitely didn't contain machine parts. A group of off-duty dockhands whispered about a ship that vanished between custom scans. And in the far booth, half hidden by steam from a malfunctioning vent, a woman in a patched flight jacket listened more than she spoke. Rebel jacket. Not overt. Nothing that screamed treason. But the stitching was wrong for a civilian cut, reinforced where armor plates could slide in. And the way she sat, back to the wall, exits mapped, wasn't casual. Mal finished his drink and pushed off the pillar. He didn't approach her. Instead, he walked past, deliberately bumping the table beside her booth. A small metallic object clattered to the floor. She reacted instantly, hand dropping to her side, eyes flicking up. Mal crouched, scooping up the object before anyone else noticed. He held out to her. A compact holoprojector, crack casing, Alliance military grade. You drop this, he said lightly. Her eyes narrowed. I don't know you. Reckon that's mutual. She hesitated, then took the device. You shouldn't pick up things that don't belong to you. Mal smiled thinly. You shouldn't bring things like that into a place like this. Empire's got eyes. Her jaw tightened. Then you'd best keep moving. Could, Mal said. But I'm looking for work. The kind that pays in favors instead of credits. That got her attention. She studied him, now really studied him. The way his weight was balanced, the scar at his temple, the eyes that had seen a war end badly. What kind of work? Transport. Extraction. Distraction. Whatever needs doing, without a parade. She glanced around the cantina, then back at him. We don't hire strangers. Good, Mal replied. I don't join causes. A beat passed. Then she stood. Walk with me. They moved through the crowd, slipping out into an alley where steam rose from grates in the pavement. Speeders roared overhead on repulsor lanes, their lights streaking like comets. My name's Tara, she said. You have one. Mal. Just Mal. Only one I answer to. They stopped under a flickering lamp. Tara turned to face him. You fly like someone who's done this before. Mal didn't deny it. Different sky. Same problems. We're not smugglers, she said. And we're not mercenaries. Never said you were. We're fighting the Empire. There it was. The word he'd been circling since he woke up in this galaxy. Mal's expression didn't change, but something inside him closed its fists. That's so. You don't sound impressed. I've seen what happens to folks who fight empires, Mal said. Usually ends with graves and speeches. Tara bristled. So you'd rather kneel? Mal leaned in slightly, voice low. I'd rather choose my fights. She held his gaze, then exhaled. There's a convoy leaving orbit in 6 hours. Imperial relief supplies. Food, medkits, power cells. Headed for a garrison world that doesn't need them. And you want to take it. We want to redirect it. Mal considered that. The Empire stealing from its own people. The quiet suffering behind clean uniforms. He'd seen that before too. Problem, he said. You don't have a ship. We had one, Tara replied. ISB seized it 2 days ago. Mal felt the twist again. Serenity. His ship, sitting in an Imperial hangar, stripped and catalogued. What if, he said slowly, I told you I know where the Empire keeps things it thinks no one's coming back for? Tara's eyes widened just a fraction. You're talking about an Imperial impound facility. I'm talking about my home. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant thunder of engines. That facility is heavily guarded, Tara said. Mal smiled, the kind of smile that came before bad decisions. So was Serenity Valley. She searched his face, then nodded once. All right, Mal. One job. We take the supplies, distribute them, and vanish. And after? After, Tara said, you decide if you walk away. Mal looked up at the sky, at stars that weren't his, but burned just as bright. He thought of flags and promises, and the weight of believing in something that could fail you. One job, he agreed. No banners. They shook hands. Above them, unseen, Imperial surveillance droids adjusted their patrol routes. And far across the city, an ISB terminal flagged a familiar name for secondary review. Imperial impound facilities were built on one simple assumption. Fear was cheaper than redundancy. The complex squatted on the outskirts of Raxus Minor's spaceport like a Durasteel tumor, low, wide, and bristling with sensor towers. Floodlights washed the landing pads in sterile white, while patrols moved with mechanical precision along predefined routes. Inside, confiscated ships rested in orderly rows, tagged, cataloged, and stripped of anything deemed valuable or dangerous. The Serenity sat near the far end of Hangar 12. Mal watched the facility through macro binoculars from a derelict warehouse 2 clicks away. He lay prone on the cracked concrete roof, rain misting against his coat, the smell of rust and whetstone thick in the air. Below him, Tara and the rest of her cell waited in silence, for beings total, none of them soldiers by training, all of them by necessity. Perimeters tighter than your friend suggested, muttered Kesh, a Duro slicer whose fingers twitched whenever he wasn't actively breaking something digital. Motion sensors overlapping turret arcs, encrypted cams. This isn't a smash and grab. Mal lowered the binoculars. Never is. You're calm for a man about to walk into an Imperial nest, Tara said quietly. Mal shrugged. I've walked into worse. Difference is, this time I know what I'm after. She studied him. You haven't told us why this ship matters so much. Mal didn't look at her. Because if I do, you'll think I'm sentimental. Kesh snorted. We're rebels. Sentimentals, kind of our thing. Mal rolled to his feet. All right, here's how this goes. We don't fight unless we have to. We don't kill unless there's no other way. And the moment this turns into a stand-up battle, we abort. Tara frowned. The supplies. We'll still be there tomorrow. Mal cut in. We won't be if we're dead. She hesitated, then nodded. Your call. You're flying. They moved at shift change, when guards were tired and patterns blurred just enough to exploit. Kesh ghosted the outer fence, slicing the sensors with hands that moved faster than Mal expected. The gate slid open with a whisper, and they slipped inside like they belonged there. Mal led, posture relaxed, stride unhurried. Confidence was a weapon. People believed what they expected to see. An Imperial officer walking with purpose was invisible. A man sneaking looked guilty. They crossed the tarmac under the roar of a departing shuttle, its engines masking the sound of their boots. Stormtroopers passed within meters, white armor gleaming, heads never turning. Hangar 12 loomed ahead. Mal felt it before he saw her. The familiar lines, the asymmetrical grace of a ship that had never pretended to be more than it was. The Serenity looked smaller here, dwarfed by Imperial bulk freighters and patrol craft. But she was intact. Scarred. Waiting. There, Mal breathed. Tara followed his gaze. That's it. She don't look like much, Mal said softly. But she's home. They were halfway across the hangar when the lights snapped to red. Klaxon screamed. Abort. Kesh hissed. We've been flagged. Blaster fire erupted from the far end of the hangar, green bolts slicing through the air. Mal shoved Tara aside as a shot scorched the deck where her head had been. Move, Mal barked. They sprinted for the Serenity, boots pounding, alarms echoing off Durasteel walls. Stormtroopers poured in from side corridors, forming firing lines with chilling efficiency. Mal slid behind a cargo crate, returning fire in controlled bursts. The unfamiliar blaster kicked differently than he liked, but the principle was the same, center mass, keep moving, Don't get pinned. Kesh. Tara shouted. Get the ramp open. I'm trying, the Duros yelled back, jacked into a nearby console. They've locked her down, triple encryption. Mal's mind raced. Imperial doctrine. Fail-safes. They assumed the owner was gone or broken. They'd assumed wrong. Mal broke cover, running low and fast, blaster bolts snapping past him. He reached the Serenity S ramp and slammed his hand against the control panel. Nothing. Come on, he growled, fingers flying. He bypassed the Imperial lock with muscle memory and stubbornness, rerouting power the way Kaylee had taught him, the way he'd learned after too many nights fixing things that weren't supposed to fly again. The ramp hissed open. Inside, Mal shouted. They piled in as blaster fire chewed up the hangar floor behind them. Mal sprinted for the cockpit, heart pounding, not with fear, but with something dangerously close to hope. He slammed into the pilot's chair, hands gripping the controls like they might vanish. The engines whined as power surged, protesting but alive. Outside, an Imperial officer stepped into the hangar, flanked by troopers. He raised a comlink. Captain Reynolds, Agent Callus's voice echoed through the cockpit speakers. Calm. Amused. I was hoping you'd try this. Mal grinned, despite himself. Reckon I hate to disappoint. Stand down, Callus continued. You cannot win this. Mal pushed the throttle forward. The Serenity lifted, repulsors screaming, skimming over crates as turret fire raked her hull. Warning lights flared across the console. Mal. Tara shouted from the co-pilot's seat. The supplies. Next time, Mal said, jaw set. Hang on. He gunned the engines and shot through the hangar doors as they exploded outward, metal and fire blossoming behind them. TIE fighters scrambled in his wake, their shrieks piercing the night sky. The Serenity burst into open air, engines burning hard as Mal took her vertical, weaving through traffic lanes with reckless precision. Blaster fire stitched the space around them. Multiple locks. Kesh yelled. They're calling in a cruiser. Mal glanced at the stars, then made a decision. He didn't jump to hyperspace. Instead, he dove straight into the industrial undercity, into canyons of steel and steam where Imperial ships hesitated to follow. The Serenity scraped through gaps too tight for TIE wings, Mal flying on instinct and nerve. One fighter clipped a tower and vanished in flame. Another broke off. Silence fell, broken only by the strained whine of overworked engines. They emerged kilometers away, battered but free. Tara stared at Mal, breathless. You could have left. Jumped away. Mal eased back on the throttle, eyes on the stars. Could have. Why didn't you? He thought of the hangar, the alarms, the way the Empire assumed people broke and stayed broken. Because, Mal said quietly, they don't get to decide who I lose. Behind them, Imperial records marked the incident as a minor security breach. Within Rebel channels, however, whispers began to spread about a smuggler who walked into an Imperial impound facility, stole back his ship under fire, and escaped without bending the knee. A ghost of the browncoats. The Serenity limped through hyperspace on half-rated power, her engines humming with a tired, stubborn rhythm that Mal felt in his bones. She'd taken hits along her port side, scoring a cracked stabilizer fin, one coolant line patched with sealant that wouldn't last forever. But she flew. That was enough. They dropped out of hyperspace near an unnamed moon on the edge of a dead system, its surface a quilt of frozen rock and rust-colored dust. Mal set the ship down in a canyon that blocked long-range scans, the landing struts sinking slightly into grit as the engines wound down. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Tara exhaled sharply and laughed, a sound edged with disbelief. You realize, she said, that ISB is going to tear this sector apart looking for you. Mal unbuckled, standing slowly. They already were. Just gave Em a reason to say it out loud. Kesh leaned back against the bulkhead, hands still shaking. That wasn't a job. That was a statement. Mal paused at that, then shook his head. Wasn't meant to be. But it will be, Tara said. People talk, especially when the Empire looks foolish. Mal turned to face her. That's what worries me. They set to work without ceremony. Kesh crawled into the access panels, muttering in 3 languages as he rerouted power. Tara and the others inventoried what little gear they'd brought, checking weapons and rations. Mal walked the length of the ship, hand brushing the walls, grounding himself in the familiar creaks and hums. Serenity was alive. Hurt, but alive. He reached the engine room and stopped, listening. The engines whispered like exhausted beasts. He smiled faintly. "You did good, girl." When he returned to the common area, Tara was waiting. "We need to talk," she said. Mal nodded. "Figured." She gestured for him to sit. He didn't. She didn't push it. "The convoy we were going to hit," she began. "It's still moving. Same route. Same escort." "And you want another go," Mal said. "I want to do it right," Tara replied. "With a ship that can actually fly." Mal folded his arms. "You know my price." "No flags," she said. "No pledges." "And no civilians caught in the middle," Mal added. "I don't do acceptable losses." Tara's jaw tightened. "That's not always possible." "Then it's not always my fight." Silence stretched. Outside, the wind howled through the canyon, carrying ice crystals that rattled against the hull. "We've lost 3 cells this month," Tara said finally. "Not to battles. To reprisals. The Empire punishes worlds that help us. People starve because of us." Mal's expression softened, just a fraction. "I know. You don't," she snapped. "You walked away from your war." Mal's eyes hardened. "I buried friends because of mine." The words hung between them, heavy and sharp. Tara looked away first. "We need supplies. Medical packs. Power cells. We need winds people can feel, not speeches." Mal considered the map projected on the table, a string of systems, patrol routes, probabilities. He saw gaps where doctrine created blind spots, places where confidence turned into complacency. "I won't join your alliance," he said slowly, "but I'll run jobs." Tara looked up. "Jobs. Quiet ones," Mal continued. "We hit where the Empire doesn't expect. We don't hold territory. We don't plant flags. We take what people need and disappear. You'd be independent." "I already am." She studied him, weighing risk against desperation. "If we do this, the Alliance will want control." Mal smiled without humor. "Then they'll be disappointed." The first run happened 3 days later. An Imperial supply depot on a mining world that hadn't met its quota. The garrison was light, the security automated. Mal flew Serenity in undercover of a freighter convoy, masking her signature in the clutter of civilian traffic. They never fired a shot. Mal timed the power surge perfectly, killing the depot sensors for 30 seconds. Long enough. Kesh sliced the locks. Tara's team moved fast, disciplined, taking only what they'd planned for: medkits, ration packs, power cells. Mal stayed in the cockpit, eyes on the sky. When an Imperial patrol ship altered course unexpectedly, Mal didn't panic. He cut engines, letting Serenity drift, her hull lost against the planet's magnetic interference. The patrol passed within kilometers, none the wiser. They were gone before the Empire knew anything was missing. Word spread. Not loudly, not officially, but in the way that mattered, through dockhands and smugglers, through whispered thanks and untraceable aid drops. A ship with no markings. A captain who didn't ask for allegiance. The Empire noticed too. ISB reports began linking incidents across sectors, supplies vanishing, garrisons undermined without open battle. No symbol, no manifesto, just disruption. Agent Callus stared at the data, lips pressed thin. "Captain Reynolds," he murmured, "you're not a rebel." Mal Reynolds sat in the pilot's chair of the Serenity, stars stretching ahead as she jumped to hyperspace once more, carrying stolen hope to a world that would never know his name. And that was exactly how he wanted it. The first world burned because Mal Reynolds stayed neutral. It wasn't a dramatic holonet broadcast or a formal Imperial declaration. No grand speech, no banners unfurled. The Empire didn't need spectacle to make a point. It needed compliance. The moon of Virex 9 had been a nothing place, a refueling stop with a half-forgotten medical outpost, and a population too small to matter on most star charts. It mattered to Mal because it was quiet, remote, a place the Serenity could set down without questions, where people traded fuel and silence in equal measure. They'd helped him once. That was enough. Mal stood in the cockpit, staring at the hollow projection hovering above the console. The image jittered, civilian footage shaky and terrified. Imperial stormtroopers moved through a narrow settlement, white armor stark against smoke-darkened buildings. A walker loomed in the background, its cannons cooling, scorched earth still glowing beneath its feet. "They're making an example," Tara said quietly behind him. Mal didn't answer. The recording ended with a scream cut short by static. Kesh swore under his breath. One of the others turned away, fists clenched. "They never transmitted a rebel code," Tara continued. "They didn't shelter a cell. They didn't fight back. They helped me," Mal said at last. "Yes," Tara said. And the Empire noticed. Silence swallowed the cockpit. The Serenity hummed softly, the only living thing in a dead moment. Mal felt the old, familiar weight settle in his chest, the one he'd sworn he wouldn't carry again. The knowledge that distance didn't equal innocence, that choosing not to fight was still a choice, and people paid for it. "I told them to stay clean," he said, voice low. "Told them not to get involved." "The Empire decides what involved means," Tara replied. Mal closed his eyes. When he opened them, the galaxy looked different. "We don't run quiet anymore," he said. Kesh looked up sharply. "Mal." "No flags," Mal continued. "No speeches. But we stop pretending this doesn't have a cost. If the Empire's going to punish worlds for helping ghosts, then the ghosts start biting back." Tara searched his face. "You're talking about escalation." "I'm talking about responsibility." She nodded slowly. "ISB's already circling you. If you hit harder, they'll bring the hammer down." Mal's mouth curved into a grim smile. "They already have. I just didn't want to see it." Their next move wasn't a raid. It was a rescue. An Imperial detention convoy transporting labor prisoners, miners, medtechs, families pulled from worlds like Virex 9. The Empire called it relocation. Everyone else knew what it was. The convoy route cut through a nebula dense enough to scramble long-range sensors. Mal studied the charts, fingers tracing invisible lines. "They'll rely on escorts and fear," he said, not expecting anyone to be stupid enough to engage. Tara folded her arms. "We don't have the firepower for a stand-up fight." "We're not standing up," Mal replied. "We're tripping them and letting gravity do the rest." They dropped out of hyperspace inside the nebula, ion clouds painting the viewport in bruised purples and sickly greens. Static crawled across the sensors. Perfect. The convoy emerged ahead, two Imperial transports flanked by a Corvette and a screen of ties. Mal killed the Serenity's active systems and let her drift, just another piece of debris in the storm. He waited, counted heartbeats, watched patterns repeat. "Now," he said. Kesh triggered the ion pulse. It wasn't powerful, just precise. The Corvette's shields flared and collapsed, its systems hiccuping as the pulse crawled through its power grid. Ties spun out of formation, pilots fighting dead controls. Mal punched the engines, bringing Serenity screaming out of the cloud cover. He flew straight at the lead transport, weapons hot. Blaster fire erupted. Mal juked and rolled, keeping his profile narrow, firing only when he had to. He clipped the transport's engines, not destroying them, just enough to force a shutdown. Docking clamps engaged. Tara shouted. They slammed against the transport's hull, magnetic clamps locking on with a bone-jarring thud. Tara's team moved immediately, cutting through the hatch with practiced efficiency. Inside, the transport was chaos, prisoners shouting, guards scrambling. Mal stayed with the ship, flying interference, drawing fire, leading the remaining ties on a chase through the nebula's worst turbulence. 2 fighters didn't make it out. The prisoners did. They transferred them fast, cramped, frightened faces flooding the Serenity's corridors. Mal caught fragments as he passed. Thanks, sobs, disbelief. They jumped to hyperspace under fire. the stars stretching as Imperial weapons flared uselessly behind them. Hours later, they set the prisoners down on a safe world with no Imperial presence and no rebel banners. Just people and the promise of not being hunted, at least for now. Mal stood on the ramp as the last family disembarked. A child looked back at him, wide-eyed. "Are you a rebel?" the kid asked. Mal knelt, meeting his gaze. "No," he said gently. "Just someone who didn't like what he saw." The ramp closed. Tara stood beside him. "You know what you are now, don't you?" Mal stared at the stars. "A target. A symbol," she corrected. He shook his head. "I never wanted that." "Doesn't matter," Tara said softly. "The Empire doesn't care what you want." Far away, on Coruscant, an ISB task force was formally authorized. Captain Malcolm Reynolds was upgraded from nuisance to threat. And across the Outer Rim, whispered stories began to spread, not of a rebel hero, but of a captain who showed up when the Empire crossed a line. The problem with becoming useful was that eventually, everyone wanted a say in how you were used. Mal learned that the hard way when 3 different messages arrived within the same hour, each routed through separate, carefully insulated channels. One from a rebel sector coordinator, one from a smuggler syndicate operating out of NAR Shada, and one that didn't bother hiding what it was, a local militia leader whose world sat squarely in the Empire's crosshairs. Mal listened to none of them immediately. He stood in the Serenity-esque galley, hands wrapped around a cup of stimcaf gone cold, staring at the star map projected above the table. Colored markers pulsed across it now, safe worlds, compromised routes, Imperial crackdowns. The map had grown crowded in a way that made his skin itch. "You keep staring at it like that," Kesh said from the corridor. "It's going to start staring back." Mal snorted. "Already is." Tara entered moments later, datapad in hand, expression tight. "The Alliance wants a meeting." "That's a bad sign," Mal said mildly. "They say they want coordination," she replied. "Centralized planning. Efficiency." Mal finally turned. "And control." Tara didn't argue. The meeting took place in deep space, aboard a repurposed medical frigate with its markings scrubbed clean. Mal brought Serenity in slow and cautious, sensors passive, weapons hot but hidden. He trusted the rebels more than the Empire, but that wasn't saying much. The rebel representatives waited in a sterile briefing room. 3 of them. 2 humans, 1 Bothan, all wearing the quiet confidence of people who believed history was on their side. "Captain Reynolds," said the woman at the head of the table. "I'm Commander Hale. Alliance High Command appreciates your contributions." Mal remained standing. "I didn't know I was contributing." Hale smiled thinly. "You've disrupted Imperial supply lines across 6 sectors. Rescued over 200 detainees. Inspired resistance, cells we didn't even know existed." Mal shrugged. "Sounds like bookkeeping." "It's momentum," Hale corrected. "And momentum needs direction." Mal's eyes hardened. "Last time I signed on for that, it ended with surrender papers." The Bothan leaned forward. "This isn't your war." "That's funny," Mal replied. "Empire's starting to feel pretty familiar." Hale tapped the table, bringing up a hollow of a fortified Imperial shipyard. "We want you to assist in a coordinated strike. Hit this facility, draw their forces, give our main fleet an opening." Mal studied the image. Heavy defenses. Civilian workforce. "There are people on that station," he said. "There are people dying everywhere," Hale countered. "This shortens the war." Mal looked at Tara. She didn't meet his eyes. "And when the Empire retaliates?" Mal asked. Hale didn't hesitate. "They will. But sacrifice is inevitable." That word landed like a punch. "No," Mal said quietly. "It's chosen." The room chilled. "We're not asking," Hale said. "We're offering legitimacy, protection, resources." "You're offering a leash," Mal replied. "I don't fly with one." The meeting ended without handshakes. The syndicate message came next. A hut named Borvo offered credits, fuel, and information in exchange for Mal services, escort runs, asset retrievals, occasional problem resolution. No ideology, just profit. Mal considered it longer than he liked. The militia leader's message came last, a grainy transmission from a man with tired eyes and a burning skyline behind him. "They're coming," the man said. "We can't hold them. We don't need to win. We just need time." Mal shut the projector off slowly. He gathered the crew. "We can't be everywhere," Tara said, voicing what they all knew. Mal nodded. "Which is why we don't try." He brought up the star map again, clearing all markers but 3. "The rebels want spectacle," he said. "The syndicates want profit. This world wants to survive." Kesh frowned. "You're picking the smallest fight." "I'm picking the one that matters to the people who'll pay the price," Mal replied. They jumped within the hour. The world, Coeur d'Vie, was already under siege when they arrived. Imperial landing craft filled the skies, disgorging troops into smoking cities. Local defense fighters burned as they rose. Mal didn't charge in. He cut power, masked Serenity S approach behind a debris field, and studied Imperial movements. He saw patterns. Overconfidence. Rigid command structures. "We're not saving the planet," he said. "We're saving the evacuation." They struck comm relays first, pinpoint attacks that blinded Imperial coordination. Then fuel depots, timed to explode just as troop transports lifted off, forcing chaos without mass casualties. Terra coordinated ground teams, guiding civilians through corridors the Empire suddenly forgot to guard. When an Imperial Star Destroyer dropped out of hyperspace, Mal didn't engage. He baited it. He led the behemoth on a chase through the system's asteroid belt, flying Serenity so close to tumbling rock that the destroyer's guns couldn't track without risking its own hull. It was madness. It worked. By the time the Empire realized the evacuation was the objective, it was too late. Coeur d'Vie burned, but it lived. They escaped with Serenity scarred and engines screaming, jumping blind to hyperspace as ties tore at their wake. Later, alone in the cockpit, Mal sat with the consequences. The rebels would call him unreliable. The syndicates would call him foolish. The Empire would call him dangerous. And the people of Coeur d'Vie? They'd remember a ship with no markings. A captain who chose them over causes. The Serenity drifted in orbit above the smoldering remains of Coeur d'Vie's industrial sector, engines idling, lights dimmed. Mal Reynolds leaned against the console, arms crossed, staring at the haze of smoke curling up from the planet cities. He could feel it in his gut, the cost of choices, of survival, of selective heroism. Tara approached quietly, voice low. "You realize the Empire won't let this go." Mal didn't look at her. "Yeah, figures. They'll hunt you harder now. No mistakes." Her eyes, usually steely, flickered with concern. "People will die." Mal shrugged. People were already dying. But even as he said it, the words tasted bitter. That was the difference between him and the factions vying for control. Their metrics were numbers, theirs were flags, theirs were ideology. His were faces. The first warning came as a blip on the sensors, one of the Empire's stealth interceptors, cloaked until now, sliding into system like a knife through the dark. Mal didn't panic. He never did. Not anymore. He punched the engines and shot the Serenity through the debris field surrounding the planetary wreckage. Laser fire flared behind them. A TIE interceptor screamed past, too close for comfort. "They're adapting," Kesh muttered, scanning. Mal's grin was grim. "We're faster." The chase lasted hours, through asteroid fields, abandoned stations, and mining rings. Mal danced the Serenity like it had a soul, her engines screaming, her hull groaning in pleasure and pain. Tara guided evacuees via comms, Kesh scrambled sensor arrays, and the rest of the crew worked in a synchronized rhythm born of necessity. Finally, Mal led the pursuers into an ion storm swirling above the gas giant's pole. Visibility dropped to nothing, sensors scrambled, and the Empire's ships faltered. Mal seized the opening and jumped to hyperspace, leaving a trail of chaos behind. Even in the quiet aftermath, tension remained. Tara crossed her arms. "You could have killed them." Mal shook his head. "I don't kill what I don't have to. That's why I'm still here." Kesh frowned. "You're saying no flags, no allegiances, but the Empire sees you as a legend now." "A nuisance with teeth," Mal corrected. "The rebels will want you Tara said. They'll see you as the perfect symbol. I'm not a symbol, Mal said flatly. I'm a man with a ship and some credit with luck. You're becoming both, Tara countered. Whether you like it or not. Mal leaned back, staring at the nebula outside. The Serenity hummed beneath him, battered but alive, a ship tied to him in ways he didn't fully understand. They'll send more, Kesh said quietly. Mal nodded. Good. Means we're doing it right. He reached for the comm and called a local informant, arranging supplies, repairs, and intel for the next run. Each call was deliberate, precise, never leaving trails, never pledging allegiance. Every action carved out a new path through the galaxy, one defined by competence, principle, and the unwillingness to bow to a flag. The galaxy was changing, slowly, imperceptibly, but it was changing. And Mal Reynolds was in the middle of it, an unaligned force, unpredictable, untamed, yet always precise. They were no longer just surviving. They were becoming a movement without name or banner, a whisper in the Empire's ear, a flicker of hope in the outer rim, a shadow moving between factions. And for the first time since waking in this strange galaxy, Mal smiled fully, just a little. The Serenity raced through hyperspace, its hull rattling as the engines pushed the limits of their aged frames. Mal Reynolds stood at the helm, jaw set, fingers tight around the flight controls, staring at the blinking NAVCOM readouts with a focus that bordered on obsession. The coordinates had been scouted carefully, cross-referenced with smuggler intel and rebel intelligence, an Imperial shipyard near the Tynax system, a place where the Empire had hidden its most advanced prototypes and supply caches. This is it, Mal muttered, the words more to himself than anyone else. Biggest target we've hit yet. Tara, crouched beside the navigation console, didn't flinch. You know the risk, right? Star Destroyer support, orbital turbolasers, full garrison. Mal's grin was tight, dangerous. I know. And it makes it more fun. Kesh's hands danced across the auxiliary panels, checking weapon calibrations, life support redundancies, and sensor arrays. We're not exactly optimized for a full-on assault. That's understatement, by the way. Mal waved a hand. Optimizations for folks who plan to survive. We plan to outsmart. The Serenity dropped out of hyperspace 100,000 kilometers from the yard, nestled into the asteroid belt that shielded the facility from most long-range scans. The Imperial shipyard sprawled across multiple platforms, automated cranes swinging over rows of starships in various states of assembly and repair. TIE fighters patrolled lazily, overconfident and predictable. Mal scanned the layout. The hangars were heavily shielded. Turbolasers covered every approach vector, and the garrison troops were doubled from standard rotations. This wasn't a minor raid. This was the Empire flexing muscle in their backyard, and Mal was about to flex right back. We hit the main supply hub first, he said. We disable communications, extract prototypes, and get out before they can organize. Any deviation, we abort. Tara studied him, eyes sharp. Aborting isn't part of your vocabulary, is it? Mal smirked. Not unless the ship explodes. Kesh muttered under his breath, bravery or insanity, sometimes hard to tell the difference with you. Mal didn't answer. Instead, he guided the Serenity along a shadowed trajectory, weaving between asteroids, avoiding the turbolaser arcs with hair-thin margins. The silence in the cockpit was broken only by the soft hum of the engines and the occasional blaster calibration from the weapons console. As they approached the supply hub, Mal activated the Serenity's cloaking maneuver. Not full stealth, just enough to mask their presence from sensors for the first few minutes. The plan was audacious. Slip in under the radar, disable the communications tower, retrieve what they needed, and vanish before the Empire realized a civilian-class transport had infiltrated one of their most secure installations. Visual on the hub, Tara said, pointing at the holographic display. Turrets automated. For heavy blasters on the main docking apron. Garrison personnel rotating on a 20-minute cycle. Mal nodded. Perfect. He drew a steady breath. Kesh, override their turret targeting. Give me a 20-second window to dock quietly. The Duros nodded, fingers flying over the console. Sparks of static ran across the screens as codes were bypassed, and Mal felt a flicker of satisfaction. Imperial engineering was methodical, but predictable. The Serenity slipped in, engines humming like a predator stalking prey. The docking clamps latched with a barely audible hiss, and the crew moved instantly into action. Tara led a team to the communications tower. Kesh and Mal handled the prototypes, the schematics, experimental blasters, and droid components slated for secret deployment. Then it happened. A warning klaxon. A patrol ship, scanning unusually close, picked up a faint sensor anomaly. Mal cursed under his breath. They're smarter than we thought. The first TIE fighter broke from its patrol, engines shrieking. Mal fired the engines at maximum output, pushing the Serenity back slightly, using magnetic clamps as leverage. Blaster bolts snapped across the hull, heating metal and scorching paint. "Brace yourselves," Mal said, voice low but steady. Tara's team returned fire from inside the docking bay, moving in perfect coordination to cover Kesh as he extracted the last of the critical components. The Serenity rocked violently as the TIE opened fire, hull groaning. Mal twisted the controls, dodging between support beams and hanging cranes. Every move was calculated to put obstacles between them and the Imperial fighters. "Never underestimate a man with a ship he knows by heart," he muttered, almost to himself. The situation escalated. Turbolasers on the platforms powered up, and the garrison began deploying troops via landing pods. Mal recognized the pattern immediately: overconfidence, splitting forces to protect multiple objectives. "Time to make a decision," he said. "We split or we die." Tara looked at him, reading the plan already forming in his mind. "We split. You're taking the prototypes." "Not exactly. I'm taking the chaos." The Serenity detached from the docking clamps in a cloud of smoke, engines flaring, and launched toward the central platform. Kesh activated a series of ion pulses, frying turret controls in synchronized strikes. Alarms screamed, but their timing was perfect. Mal dove between moving cranes, dodging tracer fire, and slammed the Serenity into a tight orbit around the main station. He jammed targeting systems with improvised signals, masking their movements as civilian traffic, and the first prototypes were loaded onto a cargo bay extension. But the Empire responded faster than anticipated. A Star Destroyer dropped out of hyperspace above the yard, turbolasers slicing through the asteroid belt with deadly precision. Mal cursed under his breath. "Looks like they finally read the last message." Tara's voice was calm. "We can't outrun a Star Destroyer. It'll catch us in minutes." Mal studied the vessel, size, angle, likely firing arcs. Then he smiled. "We don't outrun it. We outsmart it." He veered the Serenity toward the asteroid field, weaving at impossible angles, while simultaneously sending out deceptive signals mimicking a rebel strike team. Turbolasers fired at decoys, shields flared, and the crew held their breaths. The Serenity lurched as a direct hit scorched the hull. Sparks flew. Mal adjusted, pulling the ship through a narrow tunnel between asteroids, so tight even TIE fighters had to break formation to follow. Several collided with rock, others overshot, and the Star Destroyers' firing became erratic. Inside the cargo bay, Tara's team finished securing the last of the prototypes. Kesh hacked a shuttle bay computer, sending false signals indicating the Serenity had been destroyed. They had minutes, maybe less, before the Empire realized the truth. Mal's grin was fierce. "Everybody ready to vanish." "Always," Tara replied. They jumped to hyperspace with seconds to spare, leaving behind smoke, fire, and confusion. The Empire had lost prototypes, experienced failure, and seen firsthand the audacity of a captain who refused to bow. In the aftermath, the Serenity floated in quiet space. The crew was battered but alive. Mal leaned back, breathing heavily, feeling the tension bleed from his muscles. Tara approached, a mixture of admiration and disbelief in her eyes. "You just took on a Star Destroyer, a garrison, and a shipyard. Alone." Mal's grin was wry. "Not alone. We all got out alive, didn't we?" Kesh shook his head, muttering about insurance claims and hull repair costs. Never doing this again, ever. Mal turned to look at the stars outside the viewport. Maybe not. Maybe every once in a while. For the first time, he allowed himself a moment to recognize the truth. He wasn't just a smuggler anymore. He wasn't just a rogue captain scraping by on luck and stubbornness. He was becoming something the galaxy hadn't anticipated. A living, breathing counterweight to tyranny, unbound by ideology, untethered by allegiance, and uncompromising in principle. Above, in the shadow of a nearby star, the Star Destroyer adjusted its course. The Empire's reach was long, their wrath inevitable. But the Serenity and her captain had left a mark that would ripple across the outer rim, into sectors untouched by rebellion and shadowed by fear. Mal Reynolds sat back in his chair, letting the hum of the ship fill the cockpit. The galaxy was vast, dangerous, unforgiving, and he was just getting started. Section 10. The Serenity coasted through hyperspace under dimmed lights, engines purring a steady rhythm that felt almost peaceful after the chaos of Tynak. Mal Reynolds sat in the pilot's chair, fingers tracing worn grooves in the controls, staring at the stretch of stars that seemed endless, yet intimate to someone who had spent a lifetime navigating edges and corners most people never knew existed. Around him, the crew moved quietly, each absorbed in their own tasks, patching systems, running diagnostics, tending to minor injuries. But there was a shared tension in the air. The universe had shifted again, and everyone aboard knew it. "This is quiet, too quiet," Tara muttered, leaning against a bulkhead. Her voice carried the weight of someone who'd seen far too many ambushes and betrayals. "We've stirred the hornet's nest. The Empire's not going to forget Tynak." Mal didn't answer immediately. He let the silence stretch, feeling the resonance of choices, the ones that had saved hundreds but condemned others by omission. The weight of survival pressed down like a physical presence, and for the first time, he allowed himself to consider the long-term cost of his path. Kesh's voice broke the silence. "They'll come after us. Star Destroyers, ISB agents, maybe even bounty hunters who've been tipped off. And if word spreads too fast, you're a target for the rebels too. They'll want you to pledge allegiance, coordinate, command fleets." Mal's grin was tired but defiant. "Then they'll be disappointed. I don't take orders. I don't fight for flags. I fight for people I can reach." Tara shook her head. "People you can reach. And what about the ones you can't? Corps de V, the worlds we haven't saved, sometimes surviving isn't enough." Mal turned to her, expression somber, eyes reflecting the distant stars. "I know, but sometimes doing the right thing isn't about saving everyone. It's about making sure someone survives, giving someone a chance. That's all I can promise." A soft chime drew their attention. Kesh's fingers hovered over the console, sensors picking up a ship on an intercept course. "Looks Imperial, and not just a patrol. This is serious." Mal exhaled. Figures. Figures. They emerged from hyperspace to find a modified Imperial cruiser waiting in the system, its weapons powered, and fighter escorts forming a protective screen. Mal adjusted the throttle, easing the Serenity into a slow, deliberate orbit behind a nearby asteroid field. The stars blurred as the cruiser tracked them, each movement deliberate, like a predator circling prey. Tara's voice was steady but tense. "They know we're here. They're testing you. See what you're capable of." Mal's jaw tightened. They're about to find out. The battle unfolded not with brute force, but with cunning and instinct. Mal piloted the Serenity with a combination of recklessness and precision that only years of living on the edge could teach. He drew the cruiser's attention, weaving through asteroids, slingshotting around moons, and drawing the TIE escorts into traps among gravity wells and hidden debris. Each maneuver was designed to disrupt, delay, and confuse, rather than to destroy outright. Inside the cargo hold, Tara coordinated evacuees, rescue operations from other smuggling and supply runs they had conducted recently. Civilians, rebels, and neutral smugglers alike moved with purpose, knowing that every second counted. Kesh manipulated the ship's sensors and power distribution, creating false readings, masking the Serenity S true trajectory. Even as blaster fire lanced past the hull and warning lights flared, Mal felt a strange sense of clarity. This was what he was born to do. Not a soldier, not a revolutionary, not a man defined by allegiances. Just a captain, a ship, and a crew willing to trust him against impossible odds. Hours passed in a blur of maneuvers, electronic warfare, and narrowly avoided catastrophe. Imperial forces adjusted, tightened, coordinated. But they were always one step behind, forced to react to Mal's instincts rather than dictate the encounter. The Serenity emerged battered, but intact. The ship itself a testament to ingenuity and perseverance. Finally, Mal found a moment to breathe. The cruiser, frustrated and unable to engage effectively without risking destruction in the asteroid field, withdrew under heavy shielding. The ties followed reluctantly, retreating toward the Imperial command node. Silence returned, broken only by the ship's hum and the crew's subdued exhalations. Mal slumped in his chair. "We made it." Terra placed a hand on his shoulder. "Yes, but at what cost?" Mal's gaze drifted out at the endless black. "At the cost of showing people they don't have to bow to the Empire. At the cost of giving hope where there was none. That's a price I'm willing to pay." Kesh shook his head. "You're insane." "And yet," Mal said quietly, "I survived." Across the galaxy, whispers spread, not of a rebel leader, not of an organized fleet, but of a captain who moved between worlds, invisible yet decisive, who chose action over allegiance, life over ideology, pragmatism over doctrine. Stories grew in taverns in starports, in the corridors of the rebel fleet. The Serenity, a ghost ship. Mal Reynolds, a man untamed by flags or causes, yet defined by an unshakable moral compass. The galaxy, dangerous and divided as it was, had taken notice. Imperial officers debated his identity, their frustration mounting. Rebel commanders speculated on whether he could be convinced to join their cause. Smugglers and mercenaries tracked him, hoping for contracts or credits. And civilians, those he saved and those he could not, spoke his name in hushed tones of hope and admiration. Mal leaned back, eyes on the stars. He wasn't a hero, not in the conventional sense. He was a man who made choices and owned them, a captain whose allegiance was to survival and justice in the same breath, who navigated the moral gray like no one else could. He thought of the crew, Terra, Kesh, and the others, each scarred, each capable, each bound not by orders, but by loyalty. They were his family, his conscience, his legacy. Together, they had carved out a new path, one that the galaxy would remember long after the Empire's fleets were scattered and the Rebel Alliance became history. Mal whispered, almost to himself, "We're not done. Not by a long shot." And he was right. The war was far from over. The Empire would return, the Rebel Alliance would continue to press, and new threats would rise. But Mal Reynolds, captain of the Serenity, had proven that one man and one ship could shape the tide of events in ways the galaxy hadn't seen coming. He had become a legend, not because he followed a flag, but because he followed his own code, unyielding, unbroken, and unforgettable. As hyperspace streaked past, painting the viewport with lines of light, Mal allowed himself the smallest smile. He didn't know what the next battle would bring, which factions would challenge them next, or how the galaxy would react. But he knew one thing with certainty. He and the Serenity would be there, navigating the chaos, making their own rules, and ensuring that wherever tyranny rose, someone would be ready to fight it on their terms. The galaxy had a new legend now, one without allegiance, without ideology, and without compromise. And though he never sought fame, Mal Reynolds had earned it through courage, cunning, and an unwavering refusal to surrender the lives of those he could save. He turned to his crew. "Ready for the next one?" "Always," Terra replied, eyes gleaming. Mal smirked. "Good. Because the galaxy won't wait for us." The Serenity surged forward, a battered but unbroken ship, carrying a captain whose name would be whispered across star systems, sometimes in fear, sometimes in hope, always with respect. Mal Reynolds had become a legend, not because he sought it, but because the galaxy demanded it. Mal Reynolds' journey through the galaxy had transformed him from a lone smuggler into a force of unpredictable influence. He had navigated factions with a mix of pragmatism, cunning, and moral clarity, never bowing to ideology or flag, yet shaping events in profound ways. The Empire had learned that their reach had limits. The Rebel Alliance realized that true resistance could take forms outside structured chains of command. Civilians discovered that hope could come from the most unexpected sources. Through daring raids, precise interventions, and calculated risks, Mal demonstrated that heroism did not require allegiance. It required judgment, courage, and a willingness to act when others hesitated. The Serenity became more than a ship. It became a symbol of defiance, a vessel for freedom, and a beacon for those who needed it most. Though he never sought fame, Mal Reynolds' name spread across the Outer Rim and beyond, a legend whispered in cantinas, strategy rooms, and underbreath in Imperial offices alike. He remained true to his principles, proving that a single man with a ship and a crew could shape the fate of a galaxy without pledging to anyone but those he chose to protect. The galaxy had changed, and Mal was just getting started.